Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now,
Nick Pitts.
And welcome to the Point of View radio station, radio talk show. I am Nick Pitts, your host for today, and I'm joined at the Millennial Roundtable today by Kirby Anderson. And we've got a packed show for you today. So
we do, and there have been a lot of issues in the news that we've been talking about throughout this week, and we're going to see if we can resolve some of those today.
We've got all sorts of things going on, so we'll be talking a little bit about what's happened down in Austin and some of the great news that happened early this morning, as well as some of the exciting news that happened yesterday. Relative to a shooting that happened, and an SRO officer really stepped up and really, Kirby, I guess it just illuminated kind of a point that you like to make that's just so significant, right?
Well, it is. You know, when you have a bad guy with a gun, the only best defense you have is a good guy with a gun. And this in particular individual, instead of standing outside and waiting, which we've heard that one before, went in and dropped him. And we're sorry for having to kill a young person, but while he's out there trying to kill everybody else, sometimes that's the only option you really have left.
Yeah, and we'll touch on that and a little bit more. And so you'll want to check out, you can be sure to call in at any which way that you'd like at 800-351-1212, 800-351-1212, or the Millennial Roundtable. Of course, you know that I'm going to emphasize the Facebook feature that we have, facebook.com/pointofviewradio, that you can share your questions and comments. We'll be talking about those two stories. We're going to welcome from the Lion's Den, John Kontz, over the phone here in a little bit to tell us more about what's happening tomorrow on the campus of Dallas Baptist University. You've heard of Shark Tank, but have you heard of the Lion's Den? Mm-hmm. And so he'll be sharing with us some what'll be happening over there tomorrow, as well as we'll kind of move through some other news kind of later on during the show, talking about Facebook, President Trump going to court. Are we beginning to see what's happening with some of these lawsuits from these women? Does it even matter in today's age? Who influences evangelicals the most? You can find out all of these stories that we'll be covering in the next few moments afterwards at pointofview.net. But let's go ahead and jump on in, because we've got some heartbreaking but also some great news that came out of Austin early this morning. This kind of a Unabomber to a certain degree.
I say so.
Where the Unabomber took 17 years and detonated 16 bombs. This individual detonated, or at least set, 6 bombs over 17 days. But early this morning, he ended up blowing up himself when he was cornered by police officers, ending his reign of terror in the Austin area. And what was so fascinating is we don't know a lot about him, Kirby, but we do know some things about him. But it really does illuminate something within us that he was just so young, Kirby. Yes. And there was just so many questions that we still have.
This is the concern that I think a lot of us have about whether or not this could be duplicated again. Those of us that are a little bit older around the table remember the Unabomber very well, and these tend to be individuals who are somewhat loners. They're paranoid schizophrenic sometimes. They may be fairly brilliant, and they've been able to figure out ways in which they can achieve what they think is a social revolution. And so that fit perfectly the profile of the Unabomber. When I found out that this young man that blew himself up, 24 years of age, what they're saying, and really, as you will talk about in just a minute, doesn't show any of the profile, it really begins to concern us, because usually when you see somebody acting out like that, they're doing it because of some ideology. They may be a radical Muslim or something like that, or they may have some kind of environmental bent, or they're very maybe sociopathic. But here, it looks like a pretty balanced young man who obviously must have learned about how to make bombs on the internet. And you wonder if there are other people like that out there that might want to do the same thing in the future.
Yeah, so the LA Times had some pretty significant details of what we're finding out about this individual that we don't necessarily want to name. And so what's fascinating is that his mother posted a Facebook picture when he graduated from high school down in Austin in 2013, that he graduated with 30 community college hours. And so this isn't just an individual that kind of just passing by. This is a very driven individual that he's accomplished a pretty significant chunk of a college degree before he even graduated from high school. And even on his mom's Facebook post, what we saw is that he was entertaining the idea of going on a mission trip over the summer. So what we saw from 2013 is kind of some of the last things we're beginning, or at least is everything that we can find thus far on the internet. From 2013 to what led him from considering a mission trip then to 5 years later starting to set off all of these bombs. It does raise a significant amount of questions, but Kirby, you're right in that he showed a certain ability and a keen sense of being able to build a bomb that really is quite baffling, because he was able, even with the tripwire bomb that happened about a week ago, they say experts are indicating that there was just, it takes very skill to not detonate on yourself when you're making that bomb. But what we find with this individual is he had certain skills that continued to improve the more that he made these bombs over the days.
You got to believe that he just, again, learned a lot of it on the internet. And it also illustrates something else, Nick, and that is how you, as one individual or two individuals, can almost have a reign of terror. Think of these two individuals in Boston, the Boston Marathon. They're using basically pressure cookers to create bombs. And just think how you almost lock down all of Boston for a while, and the only handguns they had were insignificant, really, when you think about that. Here, this individual had some bombs, and after a while, there were people in Austin and San Antonio and everywhere saying, I'm not sure if there's a package comes to the front door, I'm going to open it. I'm going to call 911. And so it just shows you what could happen if there were terrorist groups or others that wanted to bring about some kind of terror. I mean, he was able to apparently learn this on his own. We'll maybe find out more later. And had enough skill to actually create a situation that most of us would never have imagined happening in Austin, Texas.
You bring up a great point relative to the Boston bombing, but then also kind of alluding to the Unabomber, but then even more so the D.C. sniper is what we saw a few years
there's another
back.
good example.
The D.C. sniper was someone that was able to cripple an entire city just out of fear, because it just seemed as though he was acting randomly and unmethodical relative to who he was targeting at that particular juncture. And what's fascinating with the bomber that we're beginning to see in Austin that differentiates him from the Unabomber is, by and large, during the Unabomber's time, packages weren't nearly as prevalent as they are today in an Amazon world, whereas it's just second nature for you to receive something from Amazon or from some other shipping company. And really, I would never even think twice to be able to pick up a package at Amazon, just because I do the vast majority of my shopping there. So he was able to prey upon what's just become very normal in our lives today.
Well, and again, the way they found him is because it did blow up in a FedEx facility. Mm-hmm. They went back to where it was purchased. They had the cameras, and they began to figure it out. But if he had not made that mistake, would we all be today in the Texas area wondering if we should pick up a package? I had somebody that I work with that said, you know, every once in a while you get a package from one of the publishers, but if they say it's a package for you, I'm going to let you go get it. I mean, that's the kind of fear that was created, even though most of the packages exploded in Austin. Still, you can see the concern that one individual with a little bit of technical skill was able to do and bring down, in some respects, some of the fear of people have of packages, and even begin to assault the sense of safety that most of us have.
Yeah, so interesting. And so when we come back, we're going to have to take one of those breaks. But when we come back, we're going to have John Kontz over the phone. John Kontz is with the Lion's Den of DFW, an event that's happening tomorrow here in the Dallas area at Dallas Baptist University. We'll have him over the phone, and it'll be a great opportunity for him to share kind of what's happening over at Dallas Baptist University tomorrow, as well as the opportunity that you might be able to have to participate in that and some of the neat things that are happening. So you can be sure to call in if you have a question, 800-351-1212, or check over facebook.com/pointofviewradio. We'll be back right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
In my commentaries, I often refer to the millennial generation, but what does the term millennial really mean? According to John Quiggin, millennial means nothing. That's the title of his op-ed in the New York Times. He is onto something. Some social commentators make broad statements about a particular cohort of people, baby boomers, baby busters, or millennials, and as we know, for any general rule, there are bound to be exceptions. That is why he rejects what he calls the generation game. That is the insistence on dividing society into groups based upon birth year. When I wrote a book years ago on baby boomers, and when I speak at various venues today about the millennial generation, I always talk about the fact that the trends we see are general rules. I even say that if you know millennials, you may notice that the trends I'm talking about don't necessarily apply to them. If you are a millennial, you may say some of the trends don't apply to you. Once we have this disclaimer, it then seems fair to at least notice general trends within a generation. After all, people born in the 1950s grew up in a time of unprecedented economic expansion. Young people born after the year 2000 grew up in a time when America was at war with terrorists. Even though there are important differences within a particular generation, they all have some common social experiences. And I believe that one factor that really binds a generation together is the shared technological experiences. Computers, the internet, video games, and smartphones have had a profound influence on the millennial generation and the following generation, often called iGen. In many ways, the common experience unifies a cohort like never before. That is why I'm not ready to say millennial means nothing. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
From Irwin Brothers Entertainment, I Can Only Imagine. Rated PG. Now playing. More information at ICanOnlyImagine.com.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View. I am Nick Pitts, and I'm joined at the Millennial Roundtable today by Kirby Anderson. Chelsea Human of First Liberty Institute will be joining us a little bit later. But right now, we've got John Kontz on the line. John Kontz from the Lion's Den of DFW. How are you, John?
Doing all right today, thanks.
Good to hear from you. Good to hear from you. So help our listeners to better understand. Tell us a little bit about what's happening tomorrow at Dallas Baptist University, this thing called the Lion's Den.
Yes, tomorrow morning at the Lion's Den DFW, actually the lionsdendfw.com, you'll see about I think 13 companies pitch their products and services that have a specifically redemptive edge to them. So the products and services that have been architected, or the business model has been shaped around some missional or purposeful component. And they'll be pitching to a group of panelists and investors who will be kind of critiquing and asking questions. I mean, it's a bit of a competition as well. So there's a winner and there's a couple rounds of pitches. And it's really interesting time to see kind of what's happening in entrepreneurship, what kind of businesses are being generated right now, and what kind of thought goes behind that, especially since many of the founders are millennials.
One of the things that we want to talk about, John, this is Kirby Anderson, is the actually work that you're doing. But I'm also might mention that one of the things that I'll be doing when I'm over there tomorrow is there'll be a lunch where we'll have the president of Interstate Batteries and the CEO of Rug Doctor, Rob Peabody, who's somebody I've known since he was born. That's how long I've known him, as well as Nathan Sheets of Nate's Honey. So there will be a good opportunity at lunch to talk about some of this. But again, it's a little bit like the Shark Tank in a sense for Christians. So let's, if we can, talk about what you do, because we have a link to blockitnow.com, but many people refer to that as kind of an open table for healthcare. Talk about what that entails.
Yeah, so our healthcare technology company, I'm actually a co-founder of one of the pitch companies tomorrow. Our company, what we do is we offer a referral and scheduling platform that sits behind in between doctors' offices. So if you're leaving your primary care physician, typically if you need to go somewhere else, you need a referral or an imaging appointment to be scheduled, what they'll do is they'll write a number down on the back of a business card, and they'll give that to you and say, okay, you can schedule. And really, the average delay to get an appointment is about 30 days today in healthcare. Wow. So it's not a great experience for the patient, and for doctors, it's not very ideal because they don't really know if you made the appointment or not. What our technology does is it allows, when you're leaving your doctor's office, you stop and you see the front desk person or a referral administrator. What allows the personnel to do is to actually book your appointment right there live. So they can search basically as easy as it would be to search for a reservation on OpenTable. They can say, well, this person needs an MRI of, the right side of their brain, for instance. And they will be able to book that in about 30 seconds for you. So when you leave, you might even be able to go right down the street and have that appointment in 10 minutes because they can search any availability that's within network, within your insurance capabilities. It really is a game-changing experience for both the patient and the provider on both sides.
Nick, I was just thinking about this as our millennial roundtable, and you millennials have changed some things. You now have Uber, for example, or you think of, tell me if this isn't at least a good model. John, we can do things like Hotels.com and others, and people can book all sorts of flights. Up until fairly recently, the medical facilities have been pretty much in the 19th century, haven't they? And what you seem to be trying to do is bring everything up to the 21st century. Is that a fair assessment of what's going on?
It is really interesting assessment. What we look at is we actually look at two different models of what we would call disruption. So one model of disruption is that an industry like Uber comes in to completely decimates the taxi industry, right? And that is, in our view, suboptimal because what you used to be able to do is decide who you wanted to drive you somewhere, and you had to make a bunch of kind of moral or ethical decisions in terms of, well, should I call this guy who needs help, financially, or should I, get the taxi service that's most dependable, or perhaps, I'm in, the Rotary Club with this guy who owns a limo company, so I'm going to use his company because I like to support him. Now you just press a button, and the technology makes all those decisions for you. It essentially, restricts the moral judgment you can make to one of, two options. Either I go and I use Uber, or I don't go. You can't really choose a driver. There's no loyalty or, you're not really building up a community within your community. And so what we think of as technology and disruption is more of like you mentioned the Hotels.com model, is where there's an existing infrastructure in place, and we're adding a layer of convenience and access and effectiveness on top of the infrastructure. And so with our technology, we're not determining where the patient should go. We're just facilitating actually what we think is the best interaction, is that the doctor and their patient can decide together where to go. And we feel like, some people say, well, that's a disruption. Well, not really, because they have to determine that anyway. But it's better if they determine it together and at the point of referral, because it's, 100% more likely that the patient will follow through. And our average wait time to an appointment is actually 4 days instead of 30 days. But we're not really disrupting or removing any infrastructure except the fax machine. And I'll tell you, if you talk to healthcare offices today, that's one thing they don't mind disrupting. They hate that fax. Yeah. That thing beeps all day long. Healthcare, I think, is something like 1 billion faxes a day. It's really amazing. It's actually quite a problem for efficiency. And so, that's really where we see ourselves on that spectrum.
That's fascinating. So, John, maybe if I'm asking you all to reveal secrets, then just tell me to buzz off. But I'm trying to wrap my mind around, what is it that you've done to be able to see such a significant decrease in the wait time? When you say 30 days to what you can do is 4 days. Like, I'm just shocked. Is it simply a technological problem that we're facing right now? What is that?
It's really crazy. You're going to make your it's probably going to make you mad, actually.
Oh gosh.
And it should. That the data structure inside of your doctor's EMR and the data structure inside of the physician's EMR that they're sending you to, which the EMR is basically the tool that they use to house and operate their business, their practice off of. The data structures are all the same. What it is that there's actually a restriction that EMR companies basically just make it really tough to connect to that data. And so, this solution could technically exist today. Both doctors have a calendar. Mm-hmm. Both doctors, you could technically connect to that calendar and actually be quite simple from a data layer because it's the same kind of data message. It's an SIU message or an ADT message or the different technical messages you used. But what we're doing is essentially accessing that data in a novel way that allows us to bypass the EMR companies, very sluggish and extraordinarily expensive methods of integration, so that those two doctors can both, schedule into each other's practices.
We're going to be talking about Facebook getting some of the data. This is what this reminds me, doesn't it?
It's like I'm thinking through right now. I'm like, my goodness, it sounds like they're running off day calendars and they need to upgrade to Gmail. Somebody give them a Google Calendar, for goodness sake.
Yeah, they got to go look through the Rolex here and everything. John, we need to take a break. When we come back, though, I thought we'd talk just another minute or two before we let you go about the Lion's Den, because in addition to you, there'll be a number of other companies that really are all about trying to do sort of kingdom building kind of emphasis. And for an individual that used to teach at what at that time when I was there was called Philadelphia College of the Bible, and then later Philadelphia Biblical University, and now Cairn University, you can appreciate that as well. So we need to take a break, but when we come back, I thought maybe for just another minute or two, Nick, we'll talk about that Lion's Den. And you are up there at Dallas Baptist University, and every year you are very nice to host these events.
I think one of the interesting things is the redemptive touch to this. So very different from the Shark Tank, and nothing against Shark Tank, but it's the redemptive touch to this that you've got kind of like Paul's that are tent makers, right?
Yes.
That are wanting to extend the kingdom, but also be able to earn their keep to a large degree and kind of do that impact of doubling up. What does it look like to be a player in the economic workforce, but also do so in a way that kind of bends it towards the kingdom of God? I think that's going to be really good to hear.
I think so. And when we come back, I'll talk a little bit about the luncheon tomorrow that I'm part of, because, again, you got these different CEOs, and we're going to spend a fair amount of time talking about lessons they learned from failure. And I think those are lessons that all of us can learn from as well. But need to take a break, so we'll come back in just a minute, right?
Yeah, so be sure to tune back in. We'll take one break. You can call in 800-351-1212 or jump on over to facebook.com/pointofviewradio. Share your comment or question, and we'll jump on it on over there. We'll be back right after this.
From PureFlix comes God's Not Dead, a light in darkness. Even in life's darkest valleys, a small flame can light the way toward healing and hope.
We are called to be a light in the darkness.
Starring David A.R. White and John Corbett. God's Not Dead, a light in darkness. Rated PG. Parental guidance suggested. In theaters March 30th. More information is available at godsnotdead.com.
Christians are called to have answers. Answers for those who doubt our faith, and answers for those going through difficult times. Thanks to our Truth Team members, Point of View provides those answers. You can play a vital role in bringing truth to the pressing issues of our day and truth when life doesn't seem fair. Help shine a light in darkness by giving today. Call 800-347-5151 or visit pointofview.net/team. Do not miss or minimize how much of a difference you can make. Take just a couple of minutes and join the Truth Team. 800-347-5151 and pointofview.net/team. Point of View will continue after this.
You're listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is
Nick Pitts.
And welcome back to Point of View for the Millennial Roundtable edition of the Point of View show. I am Nick Pitts, your host, and I'm joined in studio with Kirby Anderson, as well as all over the phone. We've got John Contz that's on the line that's going to be representing at the Lions Den conference tomorrow, Lions Den DFW at Dallas Baptist University. It's kind of a Christian version of Shark Tank, where individuals and companies are going to be able to pitch their products, and there's the redemptive bent that kind of differentiates it from Shark Tank. And so, John, I think that was a really interesting point that I think differentiates, like I said, and I'd be really interested relative to the healthcare company that you're kind of pitching tomorrow. Tell us a little bit more explicitly about kind of the redemptive edge of that.
Yeah, it's a great question, Nick. One of the things that we thought about as we wanted to launch a company in healthcare, what are the problems in healthcare? What are the market? What are we uniquely equipped, to solve? And it's interesting because, it's easy to look at, transparency of pricing or, just hassle. But what we felt like is as value-based care and these trends of how healthcare is paid is sweeping the nation, both doctors and their patients don't really have the tools to handle it today. And essentially what value-based care is, just a 10-second spiel is, it's that healthcare is now paid based on how the patient did and how expensive the care was, not necessarily what the doctor did. So, if you get seen for a episode of something or, a problem, your doctor is not necessarily going to get paid to see you anymore. In fact, most of the time, there's like some huge majority of the time, they don't even know what they're going to get paid or if they're going to get paid. It's all depending on some algorithm that the insurance company actually owns. And they own the data, by the way, too, to determine how doctors get paid. And so we saw this as a huge problem in that both patients and doctors would be kind of pointed into making decisions that might not be in the overall interest of both healthcare and patients. So we felt like our platform, our technology, sits right in between the decision that's most critical, which is where should this patient go, how much is it going to cost, or why should they go here, and how are they going to get here, and are they going to show up? And so we chose our product, our service, that we decided to tackle based on what we see as a future trend that's growing and growing, and actually 50% of all healthcare will be paid through a value-based contract this year in 2018. And we felt like having a tool like this was going to be absolutely critical for healthcare to kind of move from beyond some of the I would say, inequity in decision-making that's existed till now, where a couple people make a lot of decisions for a lot of other people who don't actually even know what's happening. And so that's really the redemptive part, was just saying, hey, let's get some equity of information here, and let's bring these two parties to the table as they're making that referral decision, which is probably the most strategic decision in any episode of care. Any care decision is where the patient should go. We really felt like our technology sitting there would actually do a lot of good. And you know what software is? Software is an ability to bake your ethic into any product or service. And as somebody who went to Cairn University and is theologically educated, and I love the Greek New Testament and studying that, and I'm very passionate about my faith, and trying to do everything I do in the business world out of what I believe about how the world should exist, as who God is and who I am in that world. I really think that the product that we have is a reflection of God's heart for healthcare right now. It's not what healthcare should be. We're not saying all healthcare is bad. Some of the greatest people I know are in healthcare. What we're saying is what's one step we can take with this product and service towards healthcare as it should be, and the patient and the doctor experience, and that it does the right thing for all sides of the table. And we put all those factors into a can. We shook it out. That's what this product came out, and it's actually highly informed by our faith.
That's phenomenal. It's kind of ironic to a certain degree. You're humanizing healthcare, but doing so through technology.
Yes. exactly. Yeah.
I
Yeah,
find
that's
that
what technology should do. Yeah.
That's great.
You know, just before I let you go, you have been involved, as I understand, in building and selling other companies. And talk about that for just a minute, because we might have some listeners out here that are entrepreneurs or potential entrepreneurs. How did you kind of get into the process and begin to develop the ability to build and sell so many of these different companies?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, it was through events like the Lions Den. It was through like knowing people, like the people that you're going to meet here at the Lions Den here in DFW tomorrow. You know, that's really where I became passionate about this. You know, I always felt like my faith and my work were two different things. And I realized, you know, at some point in my life, through being mentored and being, you know, taught by other people who had a unique perspective on it, so what I feel now is a biblical perspective, that entrepreneurship is actually the best way to integrate your faith in life, because you don't have somebody saying, well, this is what your job entails. It's like you're writing from the ground up. And so from my perspective, you know, I felt like, well, I could kind of create a company that I feel reflects the values of God for my community. And that's how I got into it. And then, you know, spending time, like I said, the guys at the Lions Den, you know, people who have done it, investors, you know, people who, you know, advise us that go to our church that have been through this journey. And even seeing people who worked at big corporations, you know, I can't even mention their names, but people at the very highest level of corporations who are believers, but they say, you know, I don't have freedom to make, you know, decisions, you know, 7 through 10. I can make decisions 1 through 7. And then, you know, communicating with them, and I respect where they're at, and they feel at peace and they enjoy what they're doing. But I felt for myself like, hey, I have this opportunity to make decisions 1 through 10 with the Lord, you know, inside of me, the Holy Spirit inside of me, and you know, just the understanding of business. And I have that itch to go and build something. And so I think, you know, I feel like God sometimes even informs that motivation to say, it's not just a desire of what I want to do, but he's also giving me the motivation to take a much harder path. And it's okay if you don't have the motivation. It's okay if you do have the motivation. It's just I think we're all motivated different. And for me, I had that motivation ever since I was a little kid to start a business. I mean, I started my first business at the age of 9. In fact, my brother had to sign for the papers because I was too young.
That's great.
And so he was even subcontracting me. I started out, you know, at the lowest rung there.
What were you doing at 9?
I was selling papers and cutting lawns.
Okay. Yeah, I'm familiar with the cutting lawns part. Or lawns cutting me probably is probably the better interpretation of that.
That is good. Just before I run out of time, let me just mention that the event is tomorrow, and it's the Lions Den DFW Conference. So you can go to thelionsdendfw.com or just type in Lions Den DFW. That will be helpful to you. And again, this will be an opportunity for you to, first of all, hear some of the presentations that you might be interested in. I'm involved in that keynote lunch, and that will cost you because, after all, we're giving you lunch, but you're going to have a chance to hear from people like Rob Peabody and Nathan Sheets, the head of Interstate Batteries, the CEO of Rug Doctor, and a couple of others. And so it's all at your place of employment, DFW, Dallas Baptist University.
Yeah, I think that's one of the fascinating things, because maybe some listeners are thinking to themselves, why is a Baptist college or Baptist university hosting a Christian Shark Tank event? And just to give a little publicity to Dallas Baptist University, one of the interesting things about DBU is 90% of the graduates from Dallas Baptist University go into a non-vocational ministry context. So they're going to be business people, they're going to be in finance, they're going to be entrepreneurs, they're going to be teachers, et cetera, et cetera. And at Dallas Baptist University, one of the distinctives is it's not willing to sacrifice excellence for the sake of faithfulness. It's this sense that they hold them both together in both hands of trying to be the best in the industry and train up the individuals that will be the best leaders in the industry, while also trying to figure out what is the distinctive Christian approach to this. There should be a weightiness to it, right? if you're doing all things for the glory of God, there's a weighty glory means weighty. There should be a weightiness to how you become an entrepreneur, as John was telling us a little bit. It reminded me in Genesis 2, where God has called us to cultivate the land, and it's this sense that He's given us propensities and skills. It says in Ephesians 2:10, as well as in a variety of others, Romans 12 and 1 Corinthians 12. God's given us these skill sets, and how do we utilize those skill sets in such a way that we might be able to glorify Him, one, and work for the betterment of our communities, two. And individuals like John have caught that vision that the extension of the kingdom is more than just the proclamation of the gospel, but really is utilizing your skills and passions in order that you might be able to make an impact in this world. And so I'm grateful for John, as well as grateful for entities like Dallas Baptist University for signing my paycheck, one, but also two, being committed to making faithful believers that are also productive citizens in their communities. And so we're going to come back after these commercial breaks. So I hope you'll join us right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. Hope Rising Community Church faced a problem they really liked having. They were outgrowing their facilities. For a while, the room at the Penn Hebron Garden Club in Penn Hills, Pennsylvania worked all right, but it soon became clear that the growing attendance required a move. So they signed a 3-year lease on a local warehouse building, spent thousands of dollars in renovations, and made preparations to move in for their weekly worship service. But soon after moving in, the church received orders from the city to cease and desist all their worship services and large group assemblies. Evidently, the use of the warehouse violated the city's zoning laws, even though parks, playgrounds, and educational institutions were welcomed. When Hope Rising sued the city of Penn Hills under the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act, or LUPA for short, a federal magistrate judge concluded the city violated federal law. Penn Hills was not treating Hope Rising on equal terms as the law requires, and certainly failed to show how a religious institution would cause greater harm in that zone than a park, playground, or educational institution. City zoning laws are often applied in ways that are unfair to houses of worship. Federal laws like our LUPA ensure zoning laws don't discriminate. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
Students and teachers are being told that prayer, Bibles, and religion are illegal in public school, but that's not true. Learn the facts. Read your free Religious Liberty Protection Kit for students and teachers at firstliberty.org right now. Don't let anyone steal your freedom with bad information. Get your Religious Liberty Protection Kit for students and teachers at firstliberty.org. That's firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View. I am Nick Pitts, and I'm joined in studio around the Millennial Roundtable today. We've got Kirby Anderson that's been with us for the first 45 minutes, and now we've got Chelsea Human of the First Liberty Institute. How are you, Chelsea?
I'm good. Hello, guys.
Hey, so great to have you. So if you missed us during the first part of the segment, we were talking with John Kantz, who is pitching tomorrow at the Dallas-Fort Worth, the Lions Den. That's going to be hosted at Dallas Baptist University. So you can find out more information about that on our website at pointofview.net, or you can go back and listen to this listen to the kind of interaction and the interview over at www.facebook.com/pointofview. And it's also a place that you can leave your questions or comments, and we'll be getting to those over air over the next little bit that we're on. But one of the things that we did want to do is we want to highlight something else that happened yesterday as well. So earlier in the show, we talked about how the Austin bomber was he blew himself up for all intents and purposes early this morning, and thankfully that he's no longer prowling around and striking fear into the residents of Austin. But one of the beautiful things that happened yesterday, tragic but beautiful, is that there was another school shooter that was let loose in a Maryland school. But one of the interesting things that differentiates this from Parkland is, whereas the Parkland school resource officer waited anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes before he went into the building, this school resource officer, Blaine McCaskill, decided to take it upon himself and proceeded to move quickly towards that target and neutralize that target in under a minute. And so what potentially could have been another tragedy, we just see two individuals that were hurt, and now the shooter that was killed out of this. And it really was, Kirby, it was a great moment. And what we're reminded of is just that heroes spring out of the dark and into the light when we need them the most.
I think last week I mentioned just in passing that there were some teachers in the state of Maryland that said if they ever were to allow teachers to arm themselves, they would leave the profession. Well, okay, this was not an armed teacher, but this was an armed resource individual that I think actually prevented Maryland from being another Parkland. So maybe some of those teachers would rethink whether or not that's the case. I know if you're not around guns, sometimes it seems like if somebody has a gun, that's dangerous. But sometimes, and this is a great example, when there's a bad guy with a gun, your best defense is a good guy with a gun. In this case, he did the right thing.
And it reminds us too, Chelsea, just because, there's been all the legal and bills that have been put forward, this idea of putting an age limit on certain types of guns, or just on the ability to be able to own a gun. But what we see is this is an individual. He was 17 years old and he had a gun. So it really, what we have to do, obviously, is we can't just throw our hands up in the air and say, we can't do anything. Evil people are just going to do evil things. But what we do see is that this is an individual that had the capacity and at least had the wherewithal to be able to steal, for all intents and purposes, a gun. And really, these kind of laws that are trying to legalize when you can actually own a gun really don't carry as much weight when an evil person's intent on enacting evil.
Right. As you mentioned, there's always the option to steal the gun, get a gun on the black market, let alone just take your parents' gun. Mm-hmm. There are so many ways that I think we can try preventative measures, but at the end of the day, I think the biggest lesson we should learn from this is that it was a matter of seconds before that threat was neutralized. And there is still a girl in critical condition and a stabilized 14-year-old. So I don't want to overlook that by any means. But the fact that it ended there and that he ultimately wasn't allowed to wreak more havoc than that, I think is just a victory in a sense. And I thought it was really interesting. Two of the quotes I read in an article this morning. One was a student saying how much safer she felt with the officer on campus, and remembering that these are still children, and I think it would make them maybe have a sense of security going to school, where you can't always have necessarily like a walk through a metal detector for every student that goes through the doors. It makes them feel safer to have a security guard on campus. And another student who is a survivor of the Florida shooting said, we wish our officer had responded this way with these types of protocols, because that would have saved a lot of lives. And so even students are able to recognize how important it would be, not just to discuss gun control regulations, but security regulations.
I completely agree. And Kirby, I think this illuminates something that you touched on, as well as what we saw with the juxtaposition of the Parkland SRO and then this Maryland SRO, is temperaments are just different.
Yes.
Some people are just natural around a gun and naturally gravitate towards that. If there is chaos that's broken out, they want to bring and restore the order and restore the peace. And so for teachers, not necessarily trying to force teachers to have guns, but to at least give them the opportunity, because there are certain temperaments, the way that God has knit certain individuals, that would like to be able to restore order and peace when chaos breaks out.
Well, of course, and we recognize that there's both fight and flight. Mm-hmm. And a number of years ago, Chelsea and I work in a building where one time there was what we thought was a gunshot. It was a BB gun, but one of her colleagues colleagues, instead of running away from it, ran towards where the shot came from.
Because I feel safer at work now.
Yeah,
actually.
and he's been in the military, and you recognize that there are going to be some that are going to run to the danger and some that are going to run away from it. So we're not asking everybody to be armed, but it is interesting that this took place in Maryland, and having lived in Virginia and knowing what is going to take place this weekend in Washington, D.C., I hope that when some of those speeches are given by these young individuals that are going to be calling for a complete ban on guns, they recognize that, just down the road from them, just a little bit north of where that march and those speeches are being given, there's an individual with a gun prevented another tragedy. And that may be the better answer than some of the other things we'll hear about this weekend.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things, too, like the characterizations, that everyone that owns a gun or everyone that has a gun is an evil person that has the propensity to perpetuate certain types of evil. But in reality, there was a good guy with a gun that was able to stop the evil from escalating even further. And so these characters just aren't helpful, are they?
Right. And I think, when I was reading this, I think the shooters have similar profiles from what I've read. They have similar type, issues with a father figure, sociopath, tendencies, all these things. But, even in the Austin bomber, which I know you guys talked about earlier, they had made a call to him saying, we want to talk to you. We'll speak to you. Let's stop the violence. And I think it's important for us to not when we're talking about the solutions, not to rely on the perpetrator to change course or expect them, to change their mind. This student, it was his ex-girlfriend that he was targeting. And, he didn't have any of the same issues that a lot of the other shooters have had. In fact, people were shocked that it was him. And so to say, look, there's a mixed motives here. There might be mixed mental states here. We really need solutions that are focused on just stopping the problem like this officer did, instead of trying to make up these mystical solutions of the mind for shooters that are unpredictable and maybe very determined on their course.
Yeah, because you bring up an illuminating point when you talk about the mystical solutions, like with the mind. Because
and my mom's a counselor, so I'm saying that as someone who really respects the industry.
Because you do bring up a great point, because whether it was this Austin bomber or what we're seeing with this individual that was in Maryland, there were certain issues that were going on that justified within their own mind. And we all know, as Christians specifically, we're all broken individuals. We're broken physically, we're broken mentally. And when we talk about mentally, the biblical narrative is very clear that there's this pursuit of renewing your mind in order that you might discern that which is pleasing and good. And so there needs to be some type of addressing this kind of looming gorilla in the room about the mental health issue that continues to be so pervasive in all of these tragedies, right, Kurt?
Well, I think the thing that we've learned today with both the bomber, who, again, was going to go on a mission trip, and this individual, the shooter, who, he looked like a fine, upstanding young individual, is even when you use the mental criterion, sometimes you still miss individuals, which is why you have to have a plan B.
Yep. And so we're going to have to take one of those breaks, but when we come back, we're going to continue having a conversation, everything about, is there a reason to be upset at Facebook? Some people are starting to pull out of Facebook, but we'll continue to kind of examine what's all the hubbub about Facebook recently. President Trump potentially, is President Trump even going to court? There's a couple of individuals that would like to speak out against President Trump. And then what's going on with the pro-life movement? Some interesting implications are happening, and you'll want to tune in because we'll be addressing those and more right after this.
From Affirm Films, the studio that brought you Risen and War Room, comes Paul, Apostle of Christ. Two men challenged an empire in order to live out the gospel of Jesus Christ and spread their message to the world.
Where sin abounds, grace abounds more.
Starring Jim Caviezel. Paul, Apostle of Christ. Rated PG-13. May be inappropriate for children under 13. In theaters March 23rd. More information is available at paulmovie.com.
Few of us get the chance to really make a difference, but today you have an opportunity. The question is whether you will seize it. Becoming a Truth Team partner with Point of View magnifies your impact in this generation and perhaps for many to come. When you stop what you're doing and call us or give online, you invest in hard work that has changed lives and communities for 45 years. Grab this opportunity. Call 800-347-5151 or visit pointofview.net/team. Don't let this opportunity pass by. Join the team and make a difference. 800-347-5151 and pointofview.net/team. Point of View will continue after this.